welcome to the panel involving the 3 German organizations that are part of this conversation. Sua from Casacua, Asra from Transsex Works, and Julia from Trans Interqueer. And I think I'm just gonna like start right in and also let you know, let you explain by yourself like what you do in your organizations, but also how you ended up there and why was it the right organization for you. So maybe Soa, you wanna start?
Hi everyone, I'm Soa, and yes, I'm part of Casacua, which is a trans interqueer community and health center in Kreuzberg in Berlin, Germany. And is the question also what does Casacua do, or what do I do in Casacua?
Well, both, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because there's a long list what we do in Casacua, so I don't want to bore everyone. But yeah, I mean, we founded Casacua like nearly 2 years ago. In September, it will be 2 years ago. And it was just out of necessity, because in Berlin, there are trans spaces, there are queer spaces, but they are all very right-centered. So yeah, we just wanted to have a space where we ourselves, like trans BIPOC people, are in the focus, where we center ourselves, our needs, our wishes, whatever we want to do. And yeah, that's how we ended up doing it, because we were just, I mean, it doesn't help to wait for people to do something. So we just did it ourselves. And yeah, so we're also a self-organized space with, and yeah, we have very different offers, from like medical counseling, alternative, like traditional medicine practitioners. Me, myself, I'm a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. We have different workshops, libraries, meetups, peer-to-peer support. Yeah, basically the space is there, and whatever people want to organize, however they want to bring themselves into the space, that's what is like Casacua is what people bring to the space. So yeah.
Thank you. I think we're definitely going to pick up on some of the issues that you already brought in the conversation. Asra, do you want to continue?
Hi, everyone. I'm Azra, and I'm from Transsex Works. And we are a peer-to-peer organization, or project rather, that advocates for the rights and works for the well-being of trans, inter, and non-binary sex workers. And we work very closely with the street-based sex workers in the Berlin's red light district at the Frobenstraße and Bülowstraße, so in the Bülow Kiez, basically. And yes, we started out a couple of years ago by getting funding from TRIC, actually from Trans Interqueer, to help sex workers that do street-based sex workers. And yeah, over the years, it started expanding as well on, you know, not just figuring out the immediate basic needs of, you know, sex workers on the street, but also, you know, how can we influence or change the broader foundation, basically, of all of it? Like, how can we make it influence the system as well to help the most marginalized in our community? And so it's gone to everywhere from advocacy to trying to, you know, appeal to politicians and people in the government to help out, or, you know, trying to get in all sorts of networks with other, whether it be leftist movements or, you know, organizations whose issues or problems that they tackle intersect with the ones that, you know, the people we work with, you know, the same issues that we might have, whether that be migration issues, you know, refugee topics and housing issues, and the problems with gentrification and with stigmatization, obviously, and all sorts of different issues. But yes, we are still not having a place of our own out of which we can organize and do our work from. And it has been a very long and very tiresome fight to actually get a space out of which we can work from. And funding was also one of the topics and issues we've had to deal with. And but yes, that would be the gist of it.
Yeah, thank you. Julia?
Hi everyone. Thank you. I'm Julia. I'm from Trans Interqueer, or short TRIC. We are also a peer organization that started in 2006. First as a completely volunteering organization, and slowly we were growing up, not really in numbers, but in funding and support. And so it started everything like a place to be together, transient and non-binary people who live in Berlin. And slowly we managed to get more funding in order to expand our services, like offering psychosocial counseling, offering workshops, making some kind of political and lobby work with politicians or with the press, and also trying to defend the rights of transient and non-binary people, and making some pressure to the decision-making people to improve our lives in general. And since 2020, we managed to increase our paid jobs, because before it was only 1.5 person who were paid, and now we have further fields of work, like the one where I work, which is trans, inter, non-binary, and refugees and asylum seekers. There is another field of work, which is, well, this one is a bit older, like from 2018, I think, for intersex people, and other. We have another field of work related to legal gender and name change. Yes, we try to manage to get more funding every time to increase our fields, or specifically specific fields of work. And yeah, my personal involvement, because you asked that before, didn't you, Eric? Yeah, I started being related to trans interqueer at the beginning of my transition, like seeking support and counseling, and slowly I got a bit more involved, first as a volunteer, then as a volunteering counselor, and now since last year I'm working there as a working person, getting my salary and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm gonna follow up on this issue that has, I think, been touched by the three of you, of like the funding, how you make possible the work that you do. Maybe so you said like you started, like you did this project because like, yeah, so like it was needed, you had to do it. But how did you do it? How do you get the resources to do it? How did you get the space? And why did you choose that form? Like how much does the form has to do with the goal of the space itself?
Yeah, so we are mostly like funded by our crowdfunding that has been running since we started everything. So it's basically our own communities that support our space by donating money. And yeah, I mean, we all are unpaid, all the work we do. And yeah, we are applying for fundings, but until now we got denied all the fundings we asked for, except maybe a small one for a couple of thousands. So yeah, because it's quite, I mean, we started during the pandemic, so that made it harder. So health, there's not really funding for health, because I mean, it's my assumption that it is supposed that health is offered by the state, but the question is always like, okay, who has access to the state-funded health system? So yeah, but still, yeah, a lot of fundings then say, oh, but this is like a service we provide, so they don't support it, or yeah, there's always, I don't know, a lot of different issues. What is also important for us is that we are like politically autonomous, and that we don't want to compromise on that. So we will also not get money from any organization that wants to impose anything of us, from what we do to what discourses we have to go with. We don't want to be tokenized. So yeah, of course that makes it harder too. So there are like advantages, so we can do whatever, but then also, of course, the resources are limited, and also our personal resources, the people who are most involved in organizing around Casa Qua, like we spend more time like working for free for Casa Qua than working our paid jobs that like sustain us. And this is of course like a huge privilege that we are able to do this, and not everyone can do this, and not everyone has the capacity and the energy. And also the question is, of course, how long can those who can do it can sustain it? Like how can we go further with this? So of course there's a lot of discussions and thinking about money, how we can sustain ourselves, like what we do without burning out, and at the same time continue what we do, and hopefully also expand what we do.
So for example, currently the space that you have it like, do you have to worry about like until when you will be able to sustain the space, or is that now solved? Like how is the situation in just like keeping it running, paying like the bills and all these things?
Yeah, I mean, of course, our rent is the biggest expense we have. Now, due to crowdfunding, yeah, we can, I would say for the next year and a half, we are set. Then, of course, yeah, it's also always like, do we also, want to pay people, or what do we pay people for? Like some people who gave workshops were paid, but then if we don't pay ourselves, who are we paying? So it's always like tricky how to navigate this. But now, but I think we are confident that we will find some ways around. We managed to open it, so we will manage to keep it open.
Okay, thank you. Now to you, Asra, you don't have a space yet. Like, why do forms like crowdfunding or getting funding from the city or whatever is not an option, or it doesn't seem to be viable for trans-sex works, for example? What are the differences?
Well, we are currently trying to also, get new funding and new forms of funding that suit us more. But currently, we also have a funding from the anti-discrimination, department in the state. That is also just a couple of €1,000 a year. And it comes with a lot of very restricting clauses, like we're not allowed to, spend the money on some materials that are needed and stuff like that. And it's strictly just for food. And so it limits us in our work. So we rely a lot on, mutual aid. And one of the clauses is also that we're not allowed to get any monetary donations from any other sources, which is in turn also restrictive and stuff. So we are, as I said, working to get a new form to sustain all of it. We also, all of us work unpaid. And, but yeah, the project started out with offering weekly dinners for the sex workers that work on the street at the red light district. And then COVID hit, obviously, everything got closed, and the girls often worked there as well and cooked food, etc., and got paid for it. And so it was important for us to offer them a space where they have an option to also work something else other than sex work if they do not feel like it or do not want to do it, or for any sorts of reasons. And but yeah, then COVID hit and sex work got it was not allowed to do sex work anymore, and you were not allowed to go on the street or anything. We're not allowed to hold the dinners anymore. So we turned to having our little cart. We have like a bike cart with a little cargo, bicycle. And it turned to, us giving out, food and safer sex use and safer drug use materials and condoms and stuff like that to the workers on the street. And currently now with the restrictions with COVID, getting eased up again, we are, trying to do both, trying to also offer the dinners as well as, going out on Friday, Saturday and Sunday and handing out all these materials. And, but yes, also with the situation of not having a space, it is a very long topic, and there is a cafe basically in the middle of the red light district where the trans sex workers work on a street that has stood there empty for 2 years, and that the administration is dragging their feet about renting out to us. And there's I could write an essay on it just on that topic, but we're trying to specifically get on that spot because it's accessible to the workers there. It's not somewhere in another district, and the girls literally see the whole area if they would be inside or whatnot, because we want to offer it as well for a place for them to work out of, not sex work, but if they want to work at a bar and stuff like that. And but also for them to have a safe space to get into when it's cold, or when there's people being aggressive, or to have a first contact place as well for them to communicate their needs and wants, and if there's any issues, and how we can also help, and also to offer what do you call it, support talks, Beratungen. The word is eluding my mind currently in English. Because currently we're holding them out of Kasakua and offering supportive talks to other sex workers. And yes, I lost my train of thought. But all of these issues are interconnected, and we're kind of trying to get this monetary funding to actually improve our work and to improve how we can offer help.
Yeah, thank you. So Julia, why is for Trick is rather growing and getting like more funding? How come? Like, why do you think that Trick is able to get that funding?
Well, I think, as I said before, it all started as a peer organization of people, trans and non-binary people, just coming together and making something. But at that time, in 2006, it was the first and only trans and non-binary organization, at least in Berlin. That's why I think the government accepted more or less quickly to fund part of the work because it's in the so-called welfare state of Germany. There are a lot of rights theoretically and social services and so on, but the government doesn't usually provide them directly. So it's like they contact organizations or foundations or whatever in order to get that services done, and the government pay for the services. That means that even if we are still an autonomous organization, I mean, we don't depend on the government, sorry, and we are somehow independent. We have, of course, to comply with all the requirements of the government. In that case, the local government. Also, this anti-discrimination agency of the government in Berlin. And of course, they are funding us, but it's not like a blank check or something like that. But we have to justify everything that we do, all the work that is done every year, because everything goes from one year to the other. So first we have to apply and send some kind of budget of our needs or the work we are planning to do. And once we get the approval from the government, we get the money to do that. And at the end of the year, we have to justify everything that we have done in order to get funded the next year again. So in that sense, we are not completely free. So we have to comply with certain aspects and do a job which is approved beforehand. But nonetheless, I think that's a very practical way of getting funded. Because the stability or the relatively stability that we get with this kind of fund is much higher than if we should have to depend on donations or fundraising constantly, like for example Casa Cua. So I think there are a lot of advantages, also some disadvantages, but at the end, at least we have the certainty that we can provide a service at least for a year, and hoping all the time that it's not going to be short the next year, but it provides a lot of stability, and we can plan at least our projects or our ideas in a middle term or long term in some cases. Yeah, I think that's a huge privilege, and yeah, we are really happy with it and grateful that the state provide us the money.
Yeah, thank you. So we see that you have also like that, yeah, different organizational forms, different focuses on whether you value more an autonomy or like the stability of the funding, and you'll have to navigate the advantages and disadvantages that has. So I want to now ask about how you all work together in certain instances. You mentioned you give the counseling at Casa Kua and you were supported by Trick in the beginning, or I don't know if this is still like going on, but there are also ways in which you all support each other's work. Can you share about how these connections, these collaborations come to be? Asra, maybe you want to start with that question.
Well, yes, as I stated earlier, it's, we offer consultations. It started out as offering consultations for refugee Ukrainian sex workers fleeing the war. And that was also, there was a very big backlash towards that on social media against us. We were accused of trafficking women, coercing women into doing sex work, and all sorts of crazy ideas. And actually, Reuters, or how do you say it in English? They did a fact check basically on that, and they set the record straight that we're just offering consultations for people fleeing the war, and how the system works here, and what they need to know, and if they need any help, etc. And then we broaden it to all sorts of sex workers who need assistance with whatever. And but we talk to any sorts of trans sex workers that contact us with any of their issues, and we try to redirect them to places that might be more suited for offering help. Might that be Casa Kua with health topics, and other consultation options at Trick and stuff like that. And yes, so we're all very much connected.
Yeah, Julia, you also give counseling at Casa Kua, or if I understood correctly. So there is also, can you tell us about that connection as well?
We try to, the landscape in Berlin is quite tiny, so we are not that many organizations related to trans and non-binary topics. So I think, or that's at least my point of view, that we try all the time to support each other and help each other in the terms that is possible for us. So, for example, we started recently offering counseling at Casa Kua. Momentarily, we are doing that only online because of still Corona things and logistic and organizational things, but we are planning to do it in their space, or even offering our space if people feel comfortable coming to us. And we also try to share our resources with all other organizations, always, of course, under the umbrella of what is possible for us in terms of these restrictions I said before with the government and so on. But we try to do all the time what we can, or at least to do our best to help each other.
Thank you. Yeah, and so another kind of collaborative project that Casa Kua has set up is Casa X, which is where I think also the counseling is happening. And can you tell like what the project is about, and how did you set it up also so fast as a reaction of the current situation with the war?
Yeah, Casa X, in the end, it was nothing new. Also before, we've always also supported people without papers, refugees, and so on, illegalized people. So when the war in Ukraine started, and Berlin, as it's so close to, I mean, one of the biggest cities that's like east of Eastern Germany, a lot of people arrived in Berlin, a lot of refugees. And yeah, it was very obvious how different the treatment was of like white Ukrainians and like BIPOC refugees, Ukrainian or not Ukrainian, like with Ukrainian or not Ukrainian papers. So there was a lot of support for the white Ukrainians, a lot of like white people here could identify with them. I mean, it's not new that like we are in a racist society, but it was so obvious that, yeah, like in your face racism, which sometimes it's even refreshing because it's not like the hidden thing. So it was really like people were not even pretending. So yeah, so what we did was to offer a place where people could arrive from like just land in Berlin, and from there look, okay, where like have a place to calm down, to have some food, like support them to find accommodation, like short-term accommodation, legal support, psychological support, different counselings that then came up a bit later. And yeah, so it was, yeah, because there were so many people who arrived and the state clearly didn't do anything. So we kind of, it was not just us. There are also other organizations, but yeah. And then, yeah, we also then called the project Casa X because it was a bit confusing for people, because people said Casa Qua, then people came to our space, which is actually Casa Qua. And yeah, so we needed like to rename it, because we are also working with other people that were not our usual like target group. Sounds weird, because we also opened the space to BIPOC refugees that were not queer or trans or intersex, because it was also important for us. So also, cis, straight people, whoever, like racialized people. Like we didn't support white Ukrainians because there was already the support that was offered. So yeah.
And how has the experience been in finding the support needed for BIPOC people fleeing the Ukraine war? Like, have you, for example, finding hosts for people to, or how has the experience been with that?
In the beginning, it was easier. Then, like with every crisis, like the interest of people was like slowly getting less and less and less. It was also complicated because we reached out in our communities for hosts. So a lot of people didn't feel comfortable to host like cis straight guys, but then most of people who arrived were like cis straight guys. So that was difficult to navigate sometimes, like and yeah, but then we also had like horrible situations where people said they could host people, then they opened the door and they were like, oh no, we wanted to host white Ukrainians, and then they just closed the door again. And or people who kicked people out, like first hosted them, but then kicked them out after 2 days, saying that they did the recycling wrong. Like they didn't put the paper with the paper and the plastic bottles with the plastic bottles. Like, come on. People just fled a war and they don't get the German recycling system. Like it's like, even like in the people who first supported, there was so much racism again. So that a lot of people also get again traumatized by people hosting them. So we needed also to support people to navigate that. And then Yeah, there was a family, for example, they had to, like, they got locked into a basement and like with a child and all, and they had to climb out of the window. It was like, yeah, so this is like, there was also people who are really supporting, but then again, you face the same racism with, I think some people were, yeah, I don't know. I could rant for a long time about that. So yeah, so that was also quite interesting to see again.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you for making those experiences public and sharing them in this space. I want to move to the current legal situation in Germany in terms of legal recognition for trans and non-binary people. And specifically, like last week, this new proposal for a self-determination law was presented, which is supposed to substitute the current transsexual law. And I wanted to ask in which ways this question of legal gender recognition is present in the work that you do, like how relevant it is to the people that use your services and your spaces, and what impact would this new law have? Maybe Julia, you can start.
Yeah, in my case, or at least in my field of work, working with refugees, refugees in Germany have somehow same rights than other trans and non-binary people with a German citizenship, but not in the same way, let's say. So, for example, in order to get gender or name change, they have to be already done with the asylum process, or for migrants who are not fleeing their countries, it's also the same. I mean, they have to have a permanent residency. And in case there is no similar law or system in their country of origin, they can change legally everything here. But actually, with the transgender law, you have to do it going through the court, paying for psychological reports, which are quite expensive. The process can take several months or even a year or two. And the German system in general, I mean, for everything, is particularly complicated and bureaucratic. So for a person coming new to the country, maybe not understanding or speaking the language, because everything is done in German in that case, can be really difficult to go through that through this process. And that means with a new law, which is now in discussion and so on, everything will be at least much easier. Like, you only have to present a declaration and maybe to go to a couple of counselings before. That's not clear if it's going to be like that at the end or not. But that means that you will avoid all the medicalization and pathologization, which is also quite horrible for your dignity to get asked any kind of personal gatekeeping question from the psychiatrist and so on. And so it will be much easier to get the gender and name recognition. But anyway, even with the new law, it's going to be exactly the same as it is now. That means only people who had already the asylum granted will be able to apply for it. The other thing which is also important although not directly related to that new transgender law, is that actually to be trans is considered still a mental disease by the German medical rules and so on. That means everything depends on psychiatry, psychology, to be able to go through medical or chirurgical transition. You have to pass through psychotherapy almost at any in any case, and I think that's something also that has to be improved because for example, for refugees, it's much complicated to go through that psychotherapy, because first it's quite complicated to find a psychotherapist which is trans aware or have experience with this subject. Also that are eager to do the therapy, for example, in other language or with translation, and that knows something also about the reality of refugees. So it's quite complicated to get the rights that people have to medically transition in here, and for refugees it's also quite tricky because they don't have a complete health insurance until they are at least 15 months already in Germany. So before they have a let's say reduced health insurance coverage, and it's quite difficult for them to get all that treatments, for example, to get hormones or to get operated if that's the wish of them. I mean, it's difficult for everyone in Germany, but for refugees is even much more difficult.
Yeah, thank
sorry,
you.
it was a bit long. Sorry.
We will also touch on the healthcare, well, racism and restrictions in healthcare access in Germany later on. Asra, what would the impact of such a new law be for transsex works and the work you do?
I think Julia put it very concisely, and a lot of the sex workers on the street that we directly work with are also, you know, refugees and coming from, you know, third countries, or are illegalized, and it remains to be seen how this new law is implemented and how accessible it turns out to be, and, you know, who exactly profits off of it. And, you know, our fear is obviously that, as with a lot of policies, they are turned towards the ones that are most privileged in, you know, the targeted audience, and that does not pick up, you know, the certain issues of, you know, racialized and illegalized migrants, or, you know, so my personal fear is that, you know, it turns out to be this law that is put out. It is easy to access for people who have, you know, privilege in our community, but that something similar happens, like, for instance, with the law of the third gender. I forgot what the actual term was. It was communicated as something, you know, oh my God, finally the binary has been, you know, destroyed. And if you would ask cis people or people who are not informed on the topic, or even informed people, like, it was that, like, to a degree, propagandized as something, you know, innovative, but nobody understood that it was actually only accessible to, or meant for, intersex people that could, you know, genetically prove that they are intersex. And, you know, the third gender was specifically only for them. So, you know, non-binary people were completely excluded from that and not considered at all. And so, yeah, it remains to be seen And I do not believe that a lot will change for the sex workers on the working on the street. Obviously, for the broader community, you know, for the more privileged ones, it will be. But if it will change anything, I'm hopeful it will. You know, at least because it takes away this whole bureaucratic steps. But yeah, as I said, it remains to be seen.
Yeah, thank you. So do you want to add something to the question?
Julia, and as I already said it all, yeah, so in the end, it's still like the question, like who has access to it, like, because even the people, like racialized people who now have access, like supposedly have access to the German healthcare system, they are still excluded, even though on the paper they have access to it. So what is on the paper and how the reality looks is still so different. Like, will the medical doctors not be racist anymore because of that, you know? So there are so many other layers on that that will not change even. I mean, if the, as I said, bureaucratic steps get taken away, that's one thing, but how it looks in the real, like in reality for people who are already excluded or have difficult access to healthcare, yeah, we will see how it goes.
Thank you. So as a follow-up question, because one of the things that definitely we're seeing and happens with this whenever a change is happening, maybe is the backlash and how it's then used to create polemics about, like, well, against trans, and then gender ideology is a general issue, and we're seeing this already with this new proposal. And I wanted to ask, like, in your do you perceive from your work and the communities you work with and your different projects really an increase of backlash? Like, is this something that do you experience instances of resistance of these reactions, or like, do you see a change when these things are happening, or are the communities you work with already experiencing so much stigma that there's not really an increase in those instances? I don't know. Azra, maybe you want to start.
Well, as with any systemic issues, I think there's not, you know, one cause or, you know, one thing that we can point our fingers to and be like, hey, this would improve it, or you know, this is the root cause of it. But it's, you know, a lot of different things that work at the same time to create this environment that is very hostile towards you know, the already incredibly marginalized communities. And for me personally, every time there is something in the public that's discussed that's related to, you know, trans topics, you do not want to go to the Twitter trending tags and then read stuff that people post, because it's just, yeah, a world of its own. But we have on the street, specifically in, you know, the red light district, we have noticed the increase in violence directly that the girls experience on a daily basis. Through COVID, it's gotten worse even, but it has been, let's say, galvanized by gentrification of the area as well. They have opened fancy galleries in the area, and they have like construction plans for, you know, all sorts of condos and stuff like that are obviously incredibly expensive. And, you know, the state effectively outsources its policing to the gentrifiers. They basically, the neighbors throw out trash through the windows at, you know, girls living and working on the streets. They throw glass bottles, eggs, you know, all sorts of trash. The girls have been, you know, stabbed, sexually harassed, raped even, and they have been driven over by cars, and all sorts of very, very, very heavy, you know, violence that has, you know, increased over the time and does so even more. how the discourse influences that is, you know, it is just one of the many issues that are there at the same time that influences that. And, you know, the lack of education, or, you know, in broader society, the acceptance of, you know, trans topics and all these things, as I said earlier, work together to create actually the direct, or they're the precondition to the, you know, the direct violence that a lot of us face on the streets. And yes.
Yeah, thank you. Julia, do you want to follow up?
Actually, not that much. I think Asra had explained it very well. I think it just with more visibility comes more backlash together. It's unfortunately like that.
So,
I mean, yeah, I cannot say that it has increased or decreased. Sometimes I don't know if things get more visible by social media, but I think it's nothing new. Yeah, I personally don't follow all the discourses and polemics because I have no time for this bullshit. So yeah. So we just keep doing what we do, and then yeah, there will always be people who hate and complain. I mean, and then that's it.
great, thank you. So I'm gonna connect with what Asra was sharing about the violence that the sex workers on the street are facing, and bring in the German sex workers protection law that's still that's current. So it's called protection law. As you say, well, that's not what it does. The law has brought in a registry for sex workers and also mandatory health checks, for example, as measures of protection. Can you tell us how these tools were supposed to be measures of protection and what their actual effects are?
Well, they were meant to obviously strengthen or at least that was communicated as the goal was strengthening, you know, the rights of sex workers and protecting us from violence, from exploitation, from coercion, and, you know, social stigmatization. But the effects of it, and there has been, you know, a lot of analysis on this law, has been, you know, the contrary. And there have been experts that already voiced these concerns when the laws came out. And, you know, sex work is a very diverse and very big field, so to speak. And when you create laws that affect, you know, certain communities, etc., and if you do not take their voices in this process of creating these laws, often their issues are not covered, or it makes it even worse and stuff like that. So it's, you know, the saying nothing about us without us. So obviously none of us were included in the creation of this law, and in turn it has, you know, increased stigmatization. It has increased, you know, it turned the most marginalized ones inside of our communities even more into criminality, and even more, you know, onto the fringes. And it, you know, it isolates sex workers further. It adds another highly bureaucratic, you know, procedure onto the already very troublesome German, you know, bureaucracy on its system. It is not accessible, and as I said, it's further stigmatizing. There's, you know, fears of data leaks and, you know, everything that's very connected to stigmatization, obviously. And the general enforcement of this law has often, you know, met people with a lot of xenophobia, a lot of racism, and a lot of transphobia, etc. So it's a very hostile thing. And, you know, if you look at some of the data, how many people have actually, you know, done it, it's a very minor, you know, part of the broader sex workers community. And So it's not, you know, it's one of those instances where the government communicates that it is protecting, or that is, you know, saving once again the poor women, you know, excluding all the other genders or whatever. But and then it turned just further offering even more issues and even more problems. And you know, the state doesn't know how to offer safety or protection without surveillance and without violence. And that is just, you know, it's not protecting. You know, I don't want to curse now, but it's not protecting anyone.
And what would be, from your experience, what kind of policies and instruments would actually be helpful to improve the situation of the trans sex workers on the street?
Well, there's multiple things. The first thing would be to fully decriminalize sex work. That means, you know, we needed to not be as any, you know, as any other work, to not be in the legal system, and to not be any, you know, set rules, and to offer protections, actually, you know, starting from the legal. As I said earlier, you know, it's a systemic issue. There has to be a lot of different things that work at the same time to, you know, improve the conditions of the people doing sex work. But, you know, starting from decriminalizing sex work, decriminalizing the environments of the sex workers, offering, you know, more support in building social infrastructure that's badly needed. There is no centers where they're specifically for, you know, trans femmes, for instance, that have housing issues, you know, no shelters that are specifically for trans people. There are no substance abuse centers that help, you know, specifically the trans community, that often have, you know, that cannot access these areas, that often are met with a lot of violence when they do. And you know, strengthening civil society as well, you know, trying to support peer groups that, you know, and communities that try to help one another. And but yes, there's a plethora of things that are very foundational that still need to be done. But as I said, the only thing the state knows how to do is, you know, throw police at the issue, which does not solve anything, and it does not offer any protection. And in turn, it offers even more harassment and among other issues. But it's not just specific sex worker issues. It's issues of migration, of prison abolishment. We have sex workers that are refugees that have been put in prison here in Germany for the most banal things. Like, if you would hear it, it's just the most preposterous things. And in turn, you know, trans femmes being put into men's prisons. And, you know, there's migration law issues, and all these issues need to be tackled at the same time to improve, you know, the living conditions. The housing crisis in Berlin, they're gentrifying the area where there's so many homeless people, and they're not thinking about, you know, how does this affect the actual people living on, like, literally on the street? How does this affect the workers? There's no sort of even the most basic education done in the, you know, in the kiez, in the neighborhood, to, you know, offer education on, you know, what it means to do sex work, what is the history of this. Like, that is a whole separate story, you know, that street-based sex workers on the red light district there in the Fobenstrasse has been there for more than 130 years. And it has a whole history. It has a legacy. It has a cultural impact. You know, Schöneberg is the district in Berlin is seen as the queer heart of Berlin. You know, there's rainbow flags everywhere, and it's, you know, where all of the queer people are seen as accepted and very safe to live at and stuff like that. When it was actually the street-based sex workers that, you know, created that environment back like more than 100 years ago, where queer people felt safe with their sexual and gender expression, and moved to that district basically because, you know, of the effect of the street-based sex workers. And in turn today, as you know, following the tradition, so to speak, of, you know, history treating trans movements or trans stories and whatever, trans people are being, you know, excluded and marginalized and thrown out of the space that they helped create. And there have been a lot of projects with the Schwulen Museum, for instance, as well, doing education on the history of the Kiez and of the history of, and, you know, the legacy of the red light district and the workers and stuff like that. And but yes, what was the question? I think I lost my train of thought.
I think we're at what would help to actually improve the situation. So yeah, there's it's a very complex systemic situation. And at the same time, all these problems, you encounter them like as a peer project affecting the people that you work with, that you're all organizing together. And I wanted to ask, so how do you deal with well, that has the impact on the lives in terms of precarity, vulnerability, health issues, substance dependency, and all of these issues, trauma. That's a challenge in terms of organizing. How do you deal with that? How do you work with it?
Well, we mainly try to foster a feeling of community, and we obviously, our work, we do not want it to be hierarchical. We do not want to be, you know, hey, we are here the saviors trying to, you know, save you from the situation or whatever. We want to actually, you know, foster a feeling of community and of, you know, we are all here to help each other and to be here for one another, and to instill this feeling of, you know, people are not alone in these fights. Often sex workers feel very isolated and do not have any contact with, you know, their broader community, or do not know which, you know, options and resources there are, or cannot access them for various reasons. And we want to be and strive towards helping on a very, very personal level, everyone access, you know, resources that they deserve and that they need. And but yes, it's a very diverse array of issues that we're tackling, and I could start listing it, and it will be until tomorrow. But the important thing is that we are here on a personal level, and that it is not held on, you know, we're here from Monday to Friday from this and that hour, and then please take your number, and then, okay, case number 1, next please. And which is often the experience with, you know, the people we work with their social workers and with the institutions that they're trying to maneuver and stuff like that. And for instance, one of the issues we're tackling is with their trans sex worker refugee as well, that is threatened to be deported at the end of the month, and you know, lawyers not doing, I'm trying not to curse again, not doing anything to actually, you know, help and the person, but rather be like, you know, go to the LIF or to this institution and to that institution, and for not doing, you know, anything, expect 700 something euros from a houseless sex worker that is not allowed to work here or do anything, you know. And it's like, okay, how can we help in these situations? Obviously, that has a material, what do you call it, repercussions on the lives of the people, but also mental and, you know, health issues. And in turn, it often influences, you know, the as I said, mental health, but also if they have substance abuse issues and stuff like that. And there's no places where they can turn that offers help against these things. And, you know, it's yeah, on an individual basis, but we try to offer monetary help as well. And, you know, all sorts of help that might be needed in those certain situations.
Thank you. I'm gonna stay with the topic of health and now ask Tsoa from Kasakua. Your approach is on health is you call it a holistic approach to health, and Kasakua, at least like that's how you frame it. What does that mean to you, and how does that connect to, for example, what Asra was talking about? What are all the things that affect health? How do we understand health politically?
Did you say holistic or abolistic?
Holistic.
Okay, I misunderstood. That's why I was like,
Sorry.
what? No, we don't say that. But okay. Yeah, so for us, yeah, health is, I mean, it's a very vague term in the end. And we have a lot of discussions about like, what does health actually mean? And also to like decolonize this this term. And because in this society, health is often defined by capitalism and very individualized. So health is defined like, can you work? Can you be like productive in this society? When does illness begin? It's like when you're not productive anymore. So, I mean, in a lot of cases. And so to also deconstruct those ideas that a lot of people have, and but also, okay, how far can we be healthy in a sick society? Like, or are things that are like seen as normal, are they like, you know, there's so many different layers to that. I mean, I could talk for an hour, but yeah, so, but then also to just acknowledge the different factors that can affect health, however we define it in the end, like economical factors, systemic and like structural discriminations, like day-to-day microaggressions, like isolation that a lot of people in our communities face. So there's so many different aspects that like what we actually mean by like holistic is to actually see the whole around like the human, not just as an individual, but as part of like communities, societies, and part of this whole system, and how different things affect them. Like we have a lot of people, I mean, it has been mentioned about with the whole gentrification in Berlin, so many trans people who it's impossible to find like housing, and who write us and they're like, okay, in 2 days I'm on the street. So you will not go and offer someone a massage if the like to solve their back pain, if what they need most urgently is a place to sleep and to be safe. So there are so many, yeah. So we do call ourselves a health center, but we also, yeah, want to make people aware of all the different aspects that like influence the state of a person, how a person feels in their body, mentally, and all of this. So yeah.
So
And,
yeah, sorry.
no, yeah.
So how do you like how do you work where the healthcare system, for example, fails, especially related to racism on people that are illegalized and can't access? Like, what do you offer then through Kasakua and your work, or what would your vision be as well?
Yeah, unfortunately, our own resources are sometimes also restricted in that. I mean, what we try to do is, I mean, through the medical counselings, I mean, they are only counselings in the end of the day, because we cannot offer like proper treatments. But at least to help people, like support people in navigating the system, or find different resources, find different addresses, or to just going with people to an appointment, translating Yeah, so yeah, we unfortunately didn't solve the problem yet, but yeah, we try to. I mean, we ourselves don't even know to what psychologists to go. So sometimes people ask us, and we are like, well, we ourselves, we don't go anywhere because there's none. So sometimes, yeah, you can just tell people it's fucked up and that's it. But then we try to see what we can do, and it's always very individual what people want, what people need most, and what we can offer. So
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm also looking at the time, and I think yeah, this is a good maybe finishing point for the conversation. But oh, there's a question from the audience. I'm doing the chat moderation at the same time, so it's a bit multitasking. Sorry for missing it. Okay, I'm just reading aloud. My first question, oh, hello everyone, is a question from Veer. Hello everyone, thank you for having organized, oh, well, you're welcome. My first question is quite specific and has to do with transmedicalization. Is there a part of psych evaluation in Germany where a panel of psychologists and psychiatrists evaluate each case before the person in question is allowed to even reach out to an endocrinologist in order to get HRT? Has that ever been the case? My second question is perhaps very naive. How do you grapple with despair? I don't know, does anyone want to answer to the questions?
I can answer to the first one. As far as I know, that wasn't the case in Germany. I mean, of course, you have to go through the medicalization in order to get any kind of treatment that you need. But there is no panel of psychologists or psychiatrists deciding if you are, let's say, trans enough to get HRT, which is momentary mandatory, is that you have to go to the psychotherapy and get a diagnosis. That's the point. I mean, once your transness is diagnosticated, you can start with the hormone treatment. Officially, you have to be in psychotherapy for at least 6 months in order to help the psychotherapist knowing if you are trans or not. But sometimes it's easier to get to start the hormone treatment. But I mean, it's not perfect, but there is no panel of experts deciding of your transness. Only one person decides.
Maybe I will give a turn to the second question. Is because yeah, I would instead of like how do you grapple with despair, I would want to ask like how do you keep fighting? Like what's your hope for the future? What keeps you doing the work that you do? What do you hope for the future? So you're nodding. Do you want to start?
am I nodding? I don't know. I'm very pessimistic person and very optimistic at the same time. I don't know. I juggle with both. Yeah, I mean, for me, also how to grapple with despair, or for me, it's also just like organizing is part of it. I mean, yeah, it's my way also to deal with everything, to just do things or also do things I'm passionate about. And I think, yeah, in the end, like what I do is also for myself. I mean, yeah, so I'm not a social worker and then I go and talk to someone. Yeah, so sometimes it's also complicated because you, yeah, no, that was not the question. Okay, how was the question? Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, there's a
Yeah, Asra, do you want to add?
Similarly, I saw as well. I feel like organizing is something that gives me hope and that, you know, motivates me even more to keep on doing, you know, what I do. I feel like for me, there's nothing more, I don't know, beautiful than organizing for the rights and the well-being, you know, of the people in your community and around you, and taking care of one another. And I feel like connecting with my community and with, you know, even broader with people and working together on issues. And as I said, taking care of one another is that, you know, fights my despair, that gives me energy to keep on going. And, you know, if it's the smallest of changes, in a sense of, you know, you've helped someone today, or you've helped one another, or, you know, you've contributed to, you know, improving something, then that gives, you know, even more energy to keep on going, because the pushback is very big, as it is for, you know, most of gender non-conforming people. And there's so many issues that we tackle on top of the ones that everyone does. And, you know, how do you keep on being positive in it? I mean, one would argue you cannot, but I feel like if you're together with people who are going through the similar things and that are, you know, out of their pureness of their hearts, trying to be there for you, then that is, you know, giving enough energy to push back against all the negative shit that we need to go through. Oh, and here I started cursing. But yes.
Thank you. Julia?
Well, I think I have to join you both. I don't know if it's because of the wonderful weather we enjoy the whole year in Berlin. I'm also by nature really pessimistic, and at the same time quite optimistic. I think I don't know if there is hope, but at least I think if we continue connecting with each other, organizing ourselves, getting in touch, that give us maybe not hope, but energy and motivation. I think opportunities like yesterday and today, getting or having the possibility to know a lot of other people, organizations from so far away, sharing our experiences, needs, problems, and practical ways of dealing with things. I think that kind of connection make us feel that we are not alone first, and that together we can improve something. Maybe never is going to be something beautiful and perfect, but surely it will be better. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think this was a good way to close these 2 days of like really intense conversations, lots of exchange, many topics, complicated and heavy topics as well. I want to thank everyone who's joined the conversations.